Good morning, Regis. I'm Mike. I'm the Zoom tech for this session.
Sorry, I was muted. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing well, thank you. Just a couple of housekeeping things. First, in order to meet the continuing education credits, um, session needs to be between 40 minutes and 45 minutes. You guys will be driving your own slides and all of that. I'm here just for the on the technical side. Um, think anything else? Uh, Right. When we get started, it'll get close to the start time. Um, the audience members are currently in a waiting room, and at the start time, that page switches over, shows them the link to join the Zoom session. So give it maybe 30 seconds, when start time happens, and that way it allows enough people to start joining and whatnot. And you'll see down at the on the participant list
Mhm.
as that starts to increase, when it gets to a good number, then you'll the session will technically be live, but that would be a good time for you to start your actual content.
Okay, that sounds good.
Great.
Excellent. Tracy, you have any questions?
Nope, I'm good. I popped in a little earlier to make sure that it was playing nice and you could hear me and all the good things. So
Perfect.
I'm just having a chair problem. I don't know what's going on, but it's like I'm crooked in it. Okay.
No.
All right. Now I think I'm good to go. Let's see if I can. It Regis, my CDL logo is facing the correct way for you.
Yes, as is mine.
Yes. It always drives me crazy when it shows that way. And Regis, you have the deck pulled up?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, I'm gonna let you drive if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. In fact, I'm going to see if I have the same CDL logo as you.
Think it's okay if we're different. So
Yeah.
mainly because everybody who's reading is gonna be reading different things, right?
Oh, look at that. Very
Ah,
appropriate.
I got us. We're customizing the experience, Reach.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You may want to go ahead and just test your screen share.
Yep.
This is what happens when you get home at almost 11 o'clock at night.
Gosh, Tracy.
It was a fun travel day. It was the roller coaster, like canceled, not cancel, all that fun stuff. So
You guys are seeing my screen, it looks like?
I see, and it looks beautiful, Regis.
Perfect.
Excellent. Thank you. That looks
Of
great.
course, yeah.
Regis, I do have it open just in case technical difficulties
Okay, perfect. You got it back
arise.
up.
Yeah, I have it.
I'm in one of the training rooms, so I should be hardwired in. I shouldn't drop or anything like that.
That's good. Yeah. But yeah, I figured I would let you rest easy that I do, in fact, have it here.
Perfect.
Did you have a lot of storms last night, Reed?
No, it rained for a little while, but nothing major.
Yeah, I saw there was some tornadoes in Ohio, so that's why.
Hmm. I don't know. Probably was a little further south. That's usually the case.
Yeah. And Maryland got hit, so that's what was causing all the trouble getting
That
home.
makes sense. How long were you delayed, like total?
Well, that's actually the weird part. So they told us 10 o'clock, right as we were supposed to board at 6. And then the next thing you know, it's like 7:15, and they're like, okay, they found a new route for us, so we can go. But there's a ground stoppage here in Ohio. So then
Hmm.
we had to wait for that to clear. So I think we took off around it. I think we actually took off. It says online like 7:25, but that's not true. We sat on the tarmac for like, we pushed away from the gate then, but then we sat for like 40 minutes. So,
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
but it's such a short flight that it was easy.
Well, good. I'm glad. You had me worried for a moment there.
Oh, trust me, when they changed the time to 10 o'clock, and I was like, oh, boarding at 9:15 as you're sitting there at, 5:45.
Right.
You just want to curl up and cry. You're like, And because I was delivered via wheelchair, all the food stuff was so far away. I was like,
Right.
oh no, okay. Some nice guy was like, I'll push you if we get delayed. If it really holds, I'll push you all the way to get you food. I'm like, thanks. Like it
That
was,
is nice.
people are actually very nice, contrary to what we like to think in the world. There are plenty of good, good people out there.
Especially Clevelanders.
There you go. Yeah, it was really lovely, I have to say.
All right,
So
we're about 4 minutes away from our start time, just
Sounds
FYI.
great.
perfect. Um, Regis, Melissa put something in about an
I'm working on it right now.
I was just gonna say I'll do it after the session,
I
but
got it.
if you got it, you win.
I'm done pretty much.
Um, and I found out from Kim yesterday that I get to present to the executive board on the Monday before ALA. So I am actually going to spend extra days out there anyway. It's just going to be in June instead of
That's
uh,
exciting
in
though.
August. So I think it's probably safe for you to plan for
The
August.
August one. Okay.
Yeah, well, because if I'm going to go for like 10 days now
No, I agree. I think that
or
makes the
8
most
days,
sense. And I
then
don't think it makes sense to go out there for one day.
yeah. So I'm going to do that presentation with Francis's team, which is awesome. It's going to get us
Hmm.
to the exact right people, and
Yeah.
uh, then I'll go from there. So,
All right, one more minute.
feel like we could have big countdown numbers flashing on the screen.
I know. I'm looking at my watch. It's like 5 seconds.
3, 2.
All right. Best of luck.
Thank you, Mike. All right, welcome everyone. We see everyone starting to filter in here. Good morning. Good morning. We're glad you're starting your morning with us today to discuss the future of reading, how digital reading will impact student success. We are going to take just a moment to allow some time for everybody to join the Zoom room. There's a lot of attendees joining right now, so if you just sit tight with us for another 30 seconds or so, we will get started very, very shortly. Also, Tracy and I are going to keep an eye on the chat during this session. So I see all the great good mornings coming in. That's fantastic. Once we get started, though, I please ask that you keep the chat limited to questions or relevant comments about the presentation, just so that we can keep an eye on things. Otherwise, with hundreds or thousands of attendees, the chat can get a little overwhelming there.
And for those of you who are marking good morning so that you can prove you were here, that is not necessary. Zoom is taking care of all of that on the background. So you do not have to say good morning, but we appreciate it.
It is a good morning, that's for sure. All right, so we're going to get started, like I said, in just a quick moment here. All right, and it looks like our attendees are starting to slow down, so we will get started. Welcome, everyone. Happy Thursday morning. We are very glad you're joining us for this session today on the future of reading, how digital reading impacts student success. We just left a few notes about the Zoom, but we're going to repeat it again because we have new folks joining here. A few things. Number one, the session is being recorded, so don't feel like you need to write down every single thing we're saying. We encourage you to just pay attention, stay focused on the content. It is a Zoom webinar, so your cameras and your microphones are disabled. If you have a question, we ask that you use the Q&A feature in Zoom. It's different from the chat, so if you're not familiar with that, the Q&A feature allows Tracy and I to keep track of this a little bit more clearly. And then apart from that, just keep in mind that our virtual booth is open throughout the day. So any follow-up, and I see question about slides and that sort of thing, you can go to our virtual booth. You can contact us there, and we will send you anything you're looking for. All right, so with that, we're going to get started, and we're very, very happy to be talking about the future of reading today, and specifically these digital books and how they can really impact your students and the teaching being done. Before we do that, though, we will introduce ourselves. For those of you that don't know, my name is Regis Kostelak. I am the account manager for New York City with Sora Overdrive. So I work with schools, central office folks, everybody, along with Tracy. I work a lot more on the implementation side of things, making sure you have everything your school needs to make sure that you're successful using digital books. And Tracy, I'll hand it over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy Watkis, and I am the account executive that supports all schools within New York City. And I want to make sure that everyone is seeing us. If we could get a thumbs up or a heart or some emoji to let us know. I saw a comment that somebody saw a black screen. So the person who posted that, it sounds like you're having a technical issue on your side, so you might want to leave and come back. That might solve the problem, but I think everybody else is seeing us, and all the hearts and thumbs up are warming my little heart this morning. So let's go ahead and get started, Regis.
Excellent. All right, so we're going to begin with a quick agenda, just give you an idea of what our 40 or so minutes today will look like. We're going to talk first about why digital literacy matters. We'll provide a little context and background around that. We will then clear up some digital reading myths or misconceptions. I think there's a lot of information out there about digital reading, and we want to provide some clarity there. We'll then transition to talking about the citywide digital library and how it can support your students in doing some of the things we're talking about, accomplishing some of the digital literacy skills that we'll be going over in the first two sections. And then we'll provide you with next steps and resources so that when this session ends, You don't say, hey, that was great, but what do I do next? We want you to know exactly what you should do next. So with all that said, I'm going to hand it over to Tracy to start with why digital literacy matters.
Good morning. All right. So we're going to really focus on why we are talking about digital, why the Citywide Digital Library is such an important tool in New York City. But I think as a former high school history teacher, a little history lesson is a good place for us to start today. We know that about 5,000 years ago, humans began to read and write. It was, cave drawings and all kinds of things that are very different, although with all of our emojis, I feel like we're going a little bit back towards the symbolic languages that we had originally 5,000 years ago. But it wasn't until about, Regis is going to hide my little bonus, about 550 years ago, that the printing press was developed. And because of this printing press, we were able to open up access to reading to the masses. It used to be limited to the elite. And as we know from history, there were often lots of scribes and monks and other people sitting in rooms, copying books over and over again by hand. And so with this printing press, we were able to start to educate and provide access to literacy for the masses. Now, when we look at digital and where it falls in this timeline, it's a baby. It is only about 50 years old, and it really came out of a project by a grad student at the University of Illinois. They named this project Gutenberg. We still have this going strong, and it's really a way to provide access to books, again, to the masses, very similar to the printing press, but this time in a digital form. And painstakingly, in the early days of the Gutenberg project, there were grad students and volunteers busily copying and typing books that were in the open domain. So what we're going to talk about today is how much has changed even in that 50 years. Digital started as PDFs and fixed forms, and now we have very dynamic tools that are at our hands. So that is sort of what we're going to talk a little bit about today. But then I want to talk about the skills that are being built by reading in a digital way. We all know that testing is moving to online testing in the state of New York. First group, you were successfully assessed this year, and that will expand again next year, and the year after that, it's everyone. And so we want to make sure that as kids are looking at their Regency tests and other SATs and others, because they're now digital, they need to be exposed to digital reading throughout their education process. Why is that? Because they're different skills. We need to help kids build deep, sustained digital reading and comprehension skills that you don't pick up in the short form reading that we're going to talk about today. Now, when we talk about digital reading, these skills are different. How many of us spend a lot of time on devices that look a lot like this, scrolling and swiping and reading short little bits of information? That's shallow reading. So most people think of digital reading as what we do on our screens, but what we really need is to look at the deep reading, not the shallow reading. And that's really what Sora and the Citywide Digital Library is going to expose students to. It's going to help them build those digital comprehension reading skills, the stamina to read on a screen. These are things that we hear a lot from students and staff when they dig into reading. So we're going to really focus on this impact over the course of our presentation. Now, digital sometimes gets a bad name. There's lots of misconceptions and myths out there. And I'm going to ask Regis if he might be willing to help us clear up a few of those top ones.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tracy. And before we move on, I just want to address two things that are coming through the chat pretty frequently. The first is some people seeing a black screen or not seeing any of the content that we're sharing. I've asked our Zoom support, our technical support on the call, if there's any advice that we can give to our attendees, maybe signing out and signing back in. You should be seeing all of the content. The second thing being, I know a lot of people are saying that they may have to leave for a required Chancellor remote simulation. So if you're leaving at 8:30 or so, that's okay. This session is being recorded. We encourage you to view the recording, but also during one of the many non-conflict times you have during today's conference, please visit the Sora booth. All of our information is there, and all of our resources, our resource page. So we'll share it later in the session, but where you should go after this session is discoversora.com/NYC, and we'll have all sorts of great training and how-to. So I just want to address those things before we lose some folks off the call. All right, so back to our content here. There are a lot of digital reading myths and misconceptions, as Tracy said. I think we hear this all the time, whether it's something we have internalized, some internalized bias ourselves, whether it's something we hear from parents or even students or other staff members. That's okay. We know that, like Tracy said, digital reading is a very new technology, which means that there's not as much research about it, or research is constantly shifting the landscape. So the first myth here, the first myth that we want to address is that students already have too much screen time, that we don't need to expose them to more screen time in school. I mean, this myth is definitely rooted in reality. Screen time is a very real consideration, especially for younger students. As they get into middle school and even high school, it becomes less of a concern. But the real fact here is that there is a difference between passive and active screen time. Guided screen time, specifically in the classroom, benefits students because that is when students will learn healthy digital skills. So if there is no guided screen time, as Tracy said on the last slide there, most of a student's screen time per day will either consist of shallow reading, like scrolling through Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or TikTok, or it will be passive watching. Videos, YouTube, TikTok, that sort of thing. So of course we want to say, well, they're already using screens at home, but we need to provide the opportunity for students to practice their deep digital reading skills in a classroom context so that they can develop good reading habits, and we can make sure that they're learning how to comprehend digital texts. If we don't spend time practicing these skills, and it's not taught very purposefully, then it's unlikely that students will learn them on their own, right? So although there's some truth in the fact that students have screen time in their lives that we don't want to add too much, the real truth here is that we need to make sure that students are having that guided screen time and developing the digital skills that are going to be important for their lives. The next myth that we want to discuss today is that print reading provides better comprehension than reading digitally. This one is a little complicated, and if we had had this webinar 20 years ago, I would say, yeah, this is true. Print reading does provide better comprehension than reading digitally. The fact today, as we stand in 2024, is that there's no notable difference in comprehension between reading in print and reading digitally. Now, the important factor here is the format and how you're reading, right? So reading comprehension is higher in digital texts that use paging rather than scrolling. So think about if you're reading a big long news article and you're just scrolling through the scroll bar, scrolling, you're going to retain less of that information than if you're reading an ebook that will turn pages. And that's because reading is linked to the part of your brain that controls spatial awareness. Now, this same function basically holds true in print. Studies show that students or college students, the experiment was done on, that read newspaper articles retained less information than those that read traditional books. And the reason is because that paging is very important in reading comprehension. So when we talk about digital reading, what we're discussing today, the Citywide Digital Library uses digital books that all use a paging function. Comprehension will not fall off. Our third myth here, Students prefer reading print books. How often do you hear this? We hear this all the time. Excuse me. This is one of those things that may just be an internal bias. Many of us did not grow up reading digital books, and so we may be a little less than comfortable with it. And we then ascribe that to our students. Or in another instance, it's confirmation bias, where you're only hearing from students that are strong readers, that are comfortable using the reading tools that have already been supplied to them, traditional print books and the like. Well, the truth here is that studies with middle and high school students show that digital reading is actually preferred, especially for boys and reluctant readers, which, as we know, are two student populations that tend to be a little behind in reading scores. So what we would ask you to do as educators is consider that each student has unique preferences and needs when it comes to reading, that there is no one-size-fits-all prescription that will serve everybody in the classroom, and recognize that digital reading, for a number of reasons that we'll discuss in a little while here, actually provide a lot of benefits that can support some of your most vulnerable populations. All right, and then our fourth myth here, listening to an audiobook doesn't count as reading. Students don't learn as much from audiobooks. Tracy and I always joke around because this is definitely the myth that I think has moved through our circles the most, especially as adults in book clubs, adult readers. I think there's always a little, scoffing at the person that shows up to book club and says, yeah, I listened to the audiobook. It was great. That's really undue and unnecessary. A meta-analysis of a number of different studies shows no discernible difference in comprehension between those who read a book and those who listen to the audiobook. And actually, the term that has been coined now is ear reading, that you read it with your ear. Additionally, audiobooks provide very important support for students with accessibility needs. So if you're just throwing out audiobooks but saying, oh, this is not something that develops the skills we're looking for, it doesn't count as reading, man, you're missing out on so many benefits for your students. The other thing that we didn't even list here is that audiobooks are shown to be way more engaging for school-age students. So if you have struggling readers that aren't interested in some of the books you're reading, sometimes it's as simple as just giving them the audiobook edition of the classroom read, and they will jump right in. You'll find that they're raising their hands and joining the class discussion. So basically, all of these myths that we've just gone over here point to one thing. It's the fact that we need to consider digital reading as a part of our students' lives and understand that there are nuances to the conversation, that there is no one clear answer in the classroom, but that it's an important part of the classroom experience for students moving forward. All right, and now I'm going to hand it back to Tracy to discuss how the CDL supports your students today.
Sorry, I was muted because I was feverishly typing answers to the questions that are in. I'm half answering one right now, but it's a really great question, so I'm going to answer it now. Regarding the paging and how to support young readers and what devices work best for that. And it's really just about anything but a phone. So phones have a very small screen, and so they force the document or the book into a single screen reading view. But Chromebooks, iPads, other tablets will all support that page reading that we're just talking about. But even single page reading allows you to turn the page. So let's talk a little bit about the Citywide Digital Library. The first thing that I think is most important about this library is that it is available to all students and staff in New York. One library accessible by all, which really provides equitable access for kids who might not otherwise have access to books at home. And it provides equitable access to books for schools when a school may unfortunately not currently have a librarian, although we are big advocates of every single school in New York City having a librarian. Let's go ahead and read this to the next slide. Now, what's in the Citywide Digital Library and how can it be used? One of the really great things about the CDL is that it centralizes the resources into a single place for students and families and staff to go. So instead of having to go to this platform to read this book or go to this platform to read another book, everything is in one place. The central collection is highly focused on independent reading. That is essentially a library, first come, first serve, for all students and staff in New York. But there are curricular titles in the collection as well in quantity. If your school happens to have adopted EL as their literacy curriculum, or Wit and Wisdom, those titles are available in the Citywide Digital Library in quantity so that students can access those in a digital format. The Citywide Digital Library is also focused on ensuring that we have books in languages other than English. And I saw this question pop up several different times in the Q&A. These are in the collection, and you can search and filter by language using the tools that Regis is going to talk about a little bit later in the presentation. But there is a vast collection of content in languages other than English that is available to every single student and staff member in New York. There's even a professional library for all of you. So you're here today getting some great professional development, but at the same time, often it's Saturday, you're curled up on the sofa and you want to dive into a book that supports the work that you're hearing today. Those titles are in the Citywide Digital Library. And the last group that gets a great deal of support out of the digital content is special education students, your dyslexic students, your visually impaired students, struggling readers, all kinds of different groups of students are going to find tools in the Citywide Digital Library and books that are going to meet their particular needs where they are. Regis, can we go to the next slide? So digital obviously is available anytime, anywhere. All you need is your NYC PS login credentials, aka your DOE credentials. Your same thing as your email. So it's your email address and your password that will get you into Sora. And you can access the Citywide Digital Library from TeachHub. You can also download the app to your personal devices, or often they're already pushed out to DOE tablets that exist, particularly iPads. And then when in doubt, you can always go to soraapp.com and you'll be able to log in directly. And the wonderful thing is as long as your book has been online, when you finish reading, the next device you pick up to read, it will meet you exactly where you were. So you can go from your phone to your computer, to a tablet, to grandma's computer, to your wherever you want to read. And then the thing I love the most is that not all kids have access to high-speed internet at home, and you don't need that to read on Sora. So once you download the book, which usually takes somewhere between 10 seconds and maybe a minute at most, you're going to have access to that book to read on or offline. So it is removing the barrier that is often placed for some of our families who don't have internet at home, because they can still leverage the Citywide Digital Library regardless of where they are. Next slide. Now, as you might have heard me say a few times, equitable access, equitable use. When we talk about the Citywide Digital Library and equity, we actually like to think of it in three separate buckets. One is in access. Everybody gets access to Sora. But it's also about the collection, access in the content that's in there. Can I see myself reflected in that collection? Is the language that I speak included in that collection? Do I have the ability to learn about other cultures and people. And then, of course, equity in format. We know that having access to ebooks and audiobooks and Spanish editions are going to support our students. So equity in access, format, and in content is what is going to be really important. So what does this look like in our classrooms? Let's take a look. We all know that when kids are reading a book, we want to make sure that every single student has a copy of that book. That's equality, right? Every single student is going to get a copy of Wonder in the example presented here. But instead of thinking about things from the sense of equality, we'd like to start to think about how digital can support equity. So what does equity look like with books? Instead of everybody getting the exact same book, some kids might get the ebook or the audiobook or a young readers edition or the Spanish version or the Spanish e-reader, early young reader edition. Words not coming out of my mouth here. Sorry, folks. So what we'll see is this will be different and we can meet kids where they are. So instead of assuming when we hand out that grade level text that every single student is capable of reading that text in the format that's presented, the goal and what digital will actually allow you to do is to start to strive for this. Now, not every title is going to have all of these options, but many do. And we want to be thinking about what that looks like for our students. All right, next slide.
All right, and I'm going to take over here, excuse me, and talk a little bit about what the Citywide Digital Library and some of these digital books can provide for your students. So first and foremost, I think many people already know this, but one of the greatest indicators to reading success is choice, whether or not students have choice in what they're reading. So research shows that students who have more reading choice are more motivated and engaged in their reading, and they have higher comprehension scores. So choice extends beyond just the choice in what book they're actually going to read. It also includes the choice to read in the format that is most comfortable to students. So just as Tracy was saying, the difference between equity and equality there, we want to be equitable and make sure that if a student needs a digital book or an audio book or a read along, they're encouraged to do that because their reading scores will be higher. Their success will be better. Excuse me. The next thing I want to do here is provide just a brief list of some of the skills for digital exams that are important for students to learn. We talked about how spending time in the classroom reading digital books can prepare your students for digital exams. Well, these are some of the things that we can focus on, okay? So the first and foremost, reading for comprehension on a screen. We've been talking around this the whole session, but it is a different part of the brain that learns how to read in print than that learns how to read on a screen. So students need to practice that skill, okay? Alongside that is the next one, digitally reading long passages. As we talked about, the shallowing hypothesis, the idea that if students are only reading short passages online, they're only engaging in shallow reading and they do not achieve the skill set of reading a long passage, comprehending that information, and then being able to go and answer questions about it. Right? That is one of the most important things on these digital exams. They need to be able to read long passages and then answer questions. The next one here, computer skills and haptics. One of the things that all of the states have seen when moving testing to digital is that especially with the youngest students that aren't used to using a keyboard and mouse, they struggle with the actual taking of the exam. Forget about the content. This is sometimes their first time being exposed to a keyboard as opposed to like an iPad interface. So just using digital books in the classroom is an opportunity to expose your students to the technology on which they'll be taking these exams. And that's very, very important. The next one here is an interesting concept that I want to make sure we touch on. It's referred to as AIM, or otherwise the amount of invested mental effort. So this idea, researchers point to the fact that students right now, if they do not read digital books on a regular basis, they approach screens in general with a low amount of invested mental effort or a low aim. And what that means is when they open a passage or they're about to read a passage, they assume that it will be just like TikTok or just like Twitter or their social media, that they don't need to work very hard to understand it. Whereas when they look at a print book, because they've been taught through years of schooling, hey, we're about to read this book together as a class. I want you to consider these things, consider these questions. They come in with a higher aim. So our goal is to make sure that digital texts are being used in the classroom and being treated the same way that print texts are, so that students know, hey, we're about to read this passage, we're about to read this book together. I want you to focus. I want you to consider asking these questions or answering these questions. I want you to consider these concepts that we've talked about in class, so that when students go to take their exams on a screen, they come in and approach it with a high amount of invested mental effort. That is something that will only come with practice and time. And then the final skill here, annotating and typing while reading, and it should say even reading on a screen. This is something that we teach in the classroom with print. We know students need to annotate their books, but it's a digital skill that is important on the exams, because they either will, depending on the exam, have the ability to annotate as part of a question to say, hey, highlight this passage that relates to X, or sometimes it is a feature that is allowed to be used to help them to answer questions about a particular text. But if they're not used to doing it in digital, again, they have no experience and the test may be their first time doing that. So these skills will hopefully help your students with those digital exams, and they can all be taught by just using these digital books in the classroom. I know we've had some questions coming in about languages specifically. We know that just about 40% of New York City public school students speak a language other than English at home. This is just a sampling of the languages that are represented in the citywide digital library. In fact, there are over 20 languages represented. So if you want to make sure that students are still acquiring these digital skills, even if they're not quite able to read English language texts, that's okay. We have plenty of opportunity for them to do that. The personalization features are really important as well. This is, not just about preparing students for exams, but also an accessibility issue. So with all these digital books in Sora, you have the option to change some personalization settings. That could include the lighting, right? So going from that bright white background to the dark background or a high contrast background, which can increase readability, can also remove a little bit of eye strain if students are experiencing that. They can increase the text size, which is great for students with visual impairments or just students that are struggling to read the text. And they can change the font style as well. So think about with a print book, if the font that the publisher picked is just tricky for a particular student to read, specifically thinking about students with dyslexia here, then they're just stuck with that book. Whereas with an ebook, they can change that font to something that's more clear, more bold. We even have an open dyslexic font that you may be able to see on the right-hand side there. So all of these settings are sticky for your device, and Sora will remember your selections so that when students find something that's comfortable for them and helps them get this screen reading practice in, then they will just, every book that they open will have these settings already applied. The next thing that I want to talk about is audiobooks. We talked about them briefly, but audiobooks can actually be adjusted. So someone in the chat or the Q&A mentioned, hey, there's not as many read-alongs at the high school level. That's correct. Read-alongs are books that have the text and the audio both included. Those are very popular for picture books or lower level books. At the high school level, we recommend using the ebook or the print book with the audiobook. And you can just do that by opening two separate tabs or by using the audiobook with the print book. But the benefit of the audiobook is this adjustable playback speed. So you can increase or decrease the playback speed to meet your user's preferences. So with that said, if you have a student that's reading below grade level, but they want to engage with the book that the whole class is reading, let them use the audiobook to supplement, because they may have no problem understanding the content. They're just not able to read it yet, right? They can slow it down a little bit. Otherwise, a lot of students, and you'll find a lot of students with ADD or ADHD may benefit from speeding up the text. In fact, many people just enjoy this. I know both Tracy and I, when we listen to audiobooks, we speed it up. I have to go at least 1.5. Sometimes I'm 2 times speed. And you'll find that that just helps you pay attention because, especially depending on if you have strong listening skills, you may just be able to listen to that narration. And if it's going too slow, you may lose interest. You may start to drift. So that audiobook speed is a key feature here. I mentioned annotations. One of the best things about the books in Sora is that you can highlight and take notes while you're reading. So you just highlight a portion of the text there, choose whichever color you want to use. You've got that portion highlighted, and now you can take notes. So what we recommend is asking your students particular questions the same way you would if they were reading in print. So to say, hey, we want you to look at this character, or we want you to consider cause and effect. And they can take those notes directly in the text. Again, very similarly to how they will do on specific exams. The nice thing about these notes in Sora is that you can share them out directly with teachers. You can share them as a Google Drive file, that you could share in Google Classroom. You can share them as a PDF or a text file, but that way you can take the notes in the book, export them, and share them directly with your teacher to show the progress you've made or what you're doing. You can also revisit these notes at any time during your career in New York City public schools. So if your student is reading a book in 6th grade and they go back and revisit that book in 8th grade, all of the notes and the highlights that they took in that book still exist. So it's as if it was their book to begin with. The same thing is true if students are listening to audiobooks. So if you have students that prefer audiobooks, that do better with audiobooks, we want to make sure that they don't lose some of these functions. They can just click on the bookmark button to highlight a portion of the audio, and then they can take notes so that they can jump back and revisit that passage anytime they need to. So really, really beneficial for your students, whether they're using the ebook or the audiobook. All right, and I'm going to pass it back to Tracy here to talk about some of the data that's available with digital books.
Thank you.
You have
And
a question?
no, there was a question I wanted to try to answer, and I think we're going to run out of time.
Sure.
But somebody had a comment about audiobooks and that they're great, but the tests aren't in audio. And what I want to say is we're not necessarily advocating every book be read in an audiobook. What we're saying is that we need to meet kids where they are and provide them the format that is going to best suit them. The other thing that we know when it comes to data is kids stay active in audiobooks far longer. So they are exposed to more words, more stories, more literature than they would if they are simply reading, partly because they can do that anywhere and often multitask. I tend to have my audiobook on and vacuum. So there are lots of things that we can do side by side. In fact, if you look closely on this screen, total time read, the light blue line is actually representing time read in audio versus time read in ebook in this particular example. There is all kinds of data that we're able to capture when dealing with audiobook, or I'm sorry, with data and reading digitally that you can never capture. How much time is actually being read, not what number they put on a reading log. Those kinds of things are there. And I'm going to actually say there's lots of data and information on data and Sora. And if you want to know more, you can email us at nycsora@overdrive.com. But in light of time, I want to go ahead and move on to the next slide because we're about 3 to 4 minutes from the end here. One book that I highly recommend those who are sort of struggling with digital and thinking about this is to take a look at how we read now. We may want to stop thinking about the electronic book for young children as a digital substitute to print, but instead a distinct form unto itself. We need to expose kids to digital. Almost 100% of professional reading is now done on a screen. And so whether kids like it or not, we do need to be exposing them to this, much like not all kids like math. It is important to know that this is a very valuable tool and something from a skill standpoint that does need to be addressed as educators. Another couple questions that I've seen, what grade levels are covered? How do I access? I'm going to remind everyone again, it's your DOE or New York City email addresses, student or staff. And this is a K-12 to professional development catalog, actually pre-K to 12 and professional collection of books. There are so many questions we're still answering. Some tools and some support. Regis, do you want to talk a little bit about what's available to them before we run out of time?
Absolutely. And before I touch on that, I do just want to say thank you all so much. It's great to see this much engagement and activity. Like the first session of the day, basically. We know it's so early for many folks. If we didn't get to your question, we're going to give you some resources here, and we're going to tell you where you can find us. First and foremost, one of the best resources where you can start is discoversora.com/NYC. There are 2 tabs on this landing page. There's one for students specifically and one for educators. But this resource includes instructions on how to log in, tips, some of the e-learning modules that will walk you through. This was not a session where we were going to actually demo Sora or the Citywide Digital Library. So if you want that, there are plenty of on your own e-learning modules that you can review. There are grade level reading lists. We got lots of questions about what grades are supported. There are info sheets, FAQs. There are marketing materials, promotional stuff that you can share with students or staff or families. There are multilingual materials. There's social media graphics. So this is where we want you to go. You could scan that QR code and get right there. You will be supported. If you're looking to log into Sora, again, you can find it in TeachHub, but this website will have all of the instructions on all of the different ways that you can get there. And then finally, we want you to schedule some PD for your schools. That's something that we do. We offer all the time. So work with us, your New York City team, to schedule PD. We're looking at the new school year, the 24-25 school year, and reach out to us at nycsora@overdrive.com. That email address goes to not only Tracy and myself, but your whole New York City team. And if we didn't address any of the questions you came in here with or any of the questions that you asked during the session, we apologize. There were just about 3,000 of you, so I hope you can understand, but we will answer your questions. So just reach out to us, and you can also schedule a one-on-one meeting with Tracy or myself to discuss your needs. These are some examples of some of the sessions that we schedule with folks. Could be a general introduction to Sora for maybe your staff, can be an introduction to digital class sets and using it for curriculum, multilingual needs, accessibility or special ed, and then supporting parents and families. And of course, we can do anything else as well. We are here to support you. For many folks, this is your first time being exposed to this resource. So we want to make sure you have everything that you need. What we recommend as far as next steps leaving this session today, we recommend that you help your school community get logged into the CDL on Sora. So log in yourself, but help your students. Put a note out to parents, because as summer reading comes up, we want to remind you, this digital library is available to students 24/7, and that includes the summer months. So your students can read these books and practice these digital skills all summer, okay? Number 2, we want you to share information with your staff, your students, and your families. Let them know that this is available. Let them know that they can log in. Let them know what types of books are in there, okay? And the importance of using digital that we discussed today. And then finally, just like that last step, schedule time with us or reach out to us. Just let us know what you need, and we will be happy to support you. And then finally, again, you can visit our virtual booth to access some of the resources around the CDL, all of the resources we talked about here. You can reach out to us from there, and you can enter our giveaway raffle. So again, our email is there one last time. It's nycsora@overdrive.com. Just a reminder, the virtual booth is not live in any way to Tracy and I today. So if you reach out to us through there, it'll probably be through email, and we'll reach out over the next week or so. Again, 3,000 of you, give us some time to respond to everyone. All right. With that said, thank you so much. Enjoy the Beyond Access Forum. Thank you for your time. It was so exciting and engaging. We hope everyone has a great day and a great summer break where it's coming fast upon us. Tracy, any other thoughts?
No, I am just feverishly answering questions. I'm sure everyone can see me pounding away over here. But no, I think number one, get in there and start reading. If there's content that you need that's not there, check with your school librarian, talk to your principal, reach out to the Department of Library Services or core curriculum, and or email us at nycsora@overdrive.com. We look forward to supporting you and enjoy reading all summer long in Sora.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.